sometimes feel like I don't talk to nearly enough men on this podcast, not just in life in general. There's plenty of those, but Seth is one of the first ones that I've come across who's created his own approach to managing ADHD as somebody who has not only had it all of his life, had it from an age so young, and that it's always been with him, and with two parents who understood it and knew how to advocate for him as well. So there's a lot of validation in that. I don't know about for him, but for people that want to look for support and processes. And his way of doing this makes absolute sense. So Seth, it is really lovely to speak to you today. I noticed actually that you have your surname twice on your LinkedIn. And do you get people correcting you on that all the time? Or is that because you have a double-barreled surname?
No, I actually realized that somehow glitched the other day. And
No way.
so I did just correct that recently.
Because I had images of, which was actually the first question I was going to ask you, was that you had told me when we spoke last that you're the child of two psychologists. And I was like, is this like a doctor and doctor thing where they both want their names, so they double-barreled it twice? It's like, I definitely have to ask him that one. So it's not that then.
No, it's not that. That was just a glitch when I had corrected something else, and somehow it doubled up the last name on it.
Because I was wondering for a minute. I thought, well, that's quite interesting. You could have made up some really great stories about that one. Like, you could have moved that for a while.
I could have, but it took me so long to get comfortable to decide like, oh, I'm going to use my middle initial in my signature, and now it's like, oh, it just doubled up on the last name now.
As it does. Like, oh yeah, LinkedIn sometimes makes you do that. My LinkedIn made me put my like middle initial in when I was given like your page name, and my middle name is Mary. Could it be any more Irish? Like, so then people ask me what the M is for, and I'm never quick enough to think of something really creative to say that it's for. I must actually do a bit of research on that one, actually. Someday I'll do it. Anyway, back to why we're here. So I guess because I know some of the bits and pieces, let's get to the reasons, I guess, that we're here. So we've met previously and just had a chat, and I was fascinated. So I was like, stop talking. Let's do this on a podcast instead. We were talking about the ADHD side. You were running a session that you had called ADHD, which we'll get into. But before we get to that kind of stuff, I guess, where does the story begin for you on an interest in things to do with ADHD and nursing?
The interest starts, I guess, with my own personal story, with being diagnosed young and having to live this journey, not with figuring this out, every step of the way, but having the support, knowing what's going on, knowing how to be supported, knowing that there was someone advocating for me every step of the way, which honestly I hated when I was a kid.
Of course.
I hated it so much because as a kid, the last thing you want to do is stand out. The last thing you want to be is different. And this was a diagnosis for me in the 90s, which I wasn't hyperactive. I wasn't the kid that was bouncing off the walls. So I was a kid who seemed like they were paying attention, but was getting all of these accommodations, including a word processor to take notes, because, and I know that when people are thinking, it's like, oh, so it's like computer, laptop, what? No. In the 90s, if you had a word processor, you had this like 2 foot by 2 foot box with a 1-inch screen on it that you typed into. And then I had to plug it into the classroom's computer at the end of a lesson to save my notes onto a floppy disk.
Oh my God, there's so much work involved in that. My husband, when I met him, he had one of those. He used to like to write, and I used to write on it sometimes as well. It was back when a laptop would have cost us thousands and I didn't even have the internet on it. Like, and just when you said it, I was immediately like, whoa, I remember that. I have fond memories, but also the work involved. Like you say, that tiny screen, it's like an electric typewriter, wasn't it?
But worse.
Yeah, true.
At least with an electric typewriter, you can see what you're typing a line at a time. This, you could only see 2 lines at a time and hope that what you're writing is accurate. But that's what I had, especially because my handwriting was so bad I couldn't even read it. So that was, the word processor was less work than trying to read my own handwriting. And
that's saying something.
Yeah. So that was part of it. That was, I know that was a fight for my parents to get that, but of course that stands out in a classroom then. And it went from there. Even just getting extended test taking time was a battle up until high school, when I fell through every possible crack that the public school system at least could create. And they decided, well, that's it. We can't help you anymore. The good thing is, at least here, if the public school system can't help you, they have to pay to send you to a school that can help you. And I ended up, it's very helpful. And because of that, I ended up in a college prep school for kids, specifically for kids with learning disabilities. And it was a Quaker college prep school for kids with learning disabilities. So this was a school that not only gave me the skills to understand how I thought, what my strengths were, what my weaknesses are, but also how to view myself as equal to others and how to advocate for myself and how to advocate for others.
Yeah.
And
really unique combination, actually, in fairness.
It was. And I mean, ADHD and neurodiversity in general, you're kind of wired for that strong sense of social justice anyway. And being in that Quaker school setting, it really leaned into that social justice work also and really encouraged it as well. So going with that, it just brought all of that along. And then once that safety net was gone, that's when all of those skills that I had been taught really were like, oh, these are important. I need these.
Yeah.
There was that oh no moment.
Yeah.
And that's when I brought all that along. As I got into nursing, that's when I really developed my appreciation for research, evidence-based practice. And I leaned into that, of course, for my nursing practice, but also dove into that for myself to manage my own ADHD more. And honestly, through all of this, I was a martial artist. I've been doing martial arts since I was 14. So brought the skill sets from meditation and mindfulness and just that warrior spirit to not give up with it. Bringing all of that with it this whole time up until the point where burnout really caught up with me, where staying at the bedside was no longer an option. Between the way that the healthcare system here just functions, plus the weight that I was carrying after working at the bedside through the pandemic, it just wasn't it for me anymore. I thought that becoming a nurse practitioner could be the answer. I actually did start an NP program, got halfway through it, was in clinicals, and just seeing behind the curtain more, realized this isn't it. This is just a lateral move that would let me spend less time with people and focused more on insurance billing. Not what I wanted to do.
No, not the most holistic or satisfying role I'd imagine to be in.
No. So ultimately, I left that program and found coaching, nurse coaching. So it's an additional 7 months of training within the nursing field, additional board certification, and was able to take that and really focus on this passion that's just been building. I did fight it. I was like, no, I've been living with ADHD so long. I don't want to focus on it. Ultimately, when I leaned into it, I realized that this was something that had been unavoidable this entire time. And everything has just come together between creating a program, bringing the research forward, being able to serve this community. And the truth is, part of what kicked off my wanting to focus on ADHD finally was kind of spite. I know I did not say that the first time we talked, but it was spite. It was from listening to other podcasts and seeing these other ADHD influencers online and hearing some of the things that they are talking about and how they're talking about it, and realizing, oh my God, there is so much harmful information being spread. I was like, there needs to be another voice out there, and there needs to be a way to do this effectively and safely. It's like, there's a saying that if 3 people tell you you're a horse, it's time to buy a saddle. So I bought the saddle.
No point.
And I love it. I
could
not be happier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think even listening to you talking about it now, like I realize that I think the majority of people, as somebody who's late diagnosed, the majority of people I find myself, whether it's drawn to or just happen to be bumping into them, are people that are also late diagnosed. I know of some that were diagnosed as children, but most of those are still children or barely adults, if you know what I mean. Anyone else I know I wouldn't have known well enough to still know as an adult. So it's lovely to hear the success of that experience as somebody diagnosed as a child, because I'm of the generation, and I'll be brutal in saying, I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard it either, but I'm of the generation where ADHD, at least when I was a child, so I was a child in the 80s, a teenager in the 90s, it was too much sugar and bad parenting. And what I loved about your story in particular, and you haven't specifically mentioned it, but I'll mention it now, is that you've got two psychologist parents. So that flies in the face, like it or not, of the bad parenting theory. So unless you were chowing down on loads of sugar, which I suspect not, you know, I jest because we know now that that's not what the case was, but that's what people have blamed it on for ages, even into the 2000s. And even probably there's still people blaming ADHD on that now. So it's lovely to hear when the supports were there and the education was there and the capability to fight for it was there, that to see the fruits of that labor now. Because I mean, I'm looking at kids that haven't become adults now, or I'm looking at adults that didn't have it as kids now. So it's nice to see the whole picture, and you're the whole picture, and it's great. But as like, I know you said you didn't like it. Nobody likes it when their parents are telling them what's what, or if they're advocating for them in any way when they're younger. But was it difficult? I guess, like, did they agree as two psychologists? Did they agree on the way forward all the time, as far as you were concerned, or did it cause much tension when you've got that many people that actually know stuff about it in the house? Does it go the other way?
As far as I know, they were always in agreement for how to advocate for me.
Yeah.
But there was tension in the house as far as how I interacted with them.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because there would be my mom, who was much more understanding and was able to redirect. And then there was my dad, who I locked horns with much more often, and he had a much lower tolerance for my nonsense.
That's sometimes, I think, I was thinking of like the animal world when it comes to that. Isn't there one that's like making sure that you're fed and looked after, and the other one's turfing you out of the nest, like to make sure that you survive? Is the kind of perfect combo that does teach us to become somewhat functioning adults at the end of the day. But it must have been like, for them, I guess. Are you an only child as well? Do you have siblings?
No, I do have a younger sister as well.
Oh yeah, I never thought that before.
Yeah, I have a younger sister. She's 5 years younger than me. Also has ADHD that manifests more like you see in women, where it's more anxiety.
Yeah.
But it is her own thing, and she has also been on her own path, has been highly successful, has been out there in the world blazing her own trail, and it really goes to show that when you have a system of support, it really doesn't matter how ADHD is presenting. It's about the support so that you can have the skills and tools that you need to be able to move forward. And that's what lets you thrive.
Yeah. And I think even as a parent now of ADHD kids, even for me, like two of my boys have been diagnosed with it. I say so far, but we all have the same, like, I use my inverted commas, combined type, but it's only when we were all diagnosed with it and kind of in the same space together where the penny dropped for me. I was like, hang on, this is not the same. It was the same, but very much manifested in different ways. And, you know, there's still, I know one of the things that one of them raised, he was very worried about, like he wanted to go on medication, but he's like, am I going to lose my personality when I do this? And I was arguing with him, well, did I lose mine when I did? But when I look at it, like, there's room for personality, and there's room for different tastes, and there's room for different opinions and all these different things. But the adaptations or the needs of each of the three of us are entirely different. Like, I have the greatest sympathy for my husband, who's trying to keep up with all, like, he would have done a lot of it anyway, but now he understands what it all is. I don't know. I'd say he must be the most exhausted of all of us. But just understanding that one solution for one person isn't the right solution for the next person. And that blew my mind, because I just assumed, well, if they're diagnosed with the same kind, if it's combined like mine, then they must need exactly the same things that I do, because they're biologically related to me. No, not even sort of, like, not even a bit. It's totally different. And That was an adjustment. I made assumptions wrongly, so like that was a massive adjustment.
I think one of the assumptions that, and I mean, it's one of the wrong assumptions that gets made with ADHD all the time, is that ADHD is this wide cast diagnosis, and it's not. It's this, just, I'm smacking my mic around. It's this very narrow diagnosis, and all of the other symptoms that you and I and anyone with ADHD experience outside of that diagnostic window that is ADHD is because 90% of people with ADHD have other neurospiciness going on. It's not just one thing. It is lots of other things going on. And that's what makes everyone's experience so unique. But it also means that there needs to be a huge amount of flexibility and understanding and empathy in addressing it, because there is no one size fits all, because everyone's bringing something a little different in how that brain chemistry and how that brain development is occurring.
Yes. And I think that's the thing that I would have traditionally said catches people the most, meaning neurotypical, but obviously I've been caught out by it as well, is people going, well, what do I put in place? What do I do to make sure that everybody's looked after? I'm like, it's not quite that easy. And then it looks like I'm being difficult, but I'm like, it's not. It's so different for each person. Yeah, all of the things that people might need as accommodations could be super, super simple. Like email me with bullet points, or don't send me big paragraphs, or, you know, if you send me a message, try and tell me straight away in that first message what it is that you want me for. Because if you send me just a hello, I'm like, oh my God, am I in trouble? Do you know, or whatever it is, these kind of things. They're not big adjustments for people to make. And really on a human level, they're probably things you should be putting in place for everybody. But there's this tendency, like everything, that there's going to be a way of blanket addressing as much of that group as possible. And I think it's like the impossible puzzle, in the sense that no matter how many different ways we talk about it, there isn't a blanket approach where you're going to get, okay, 80% of those ADHDers out there are going to be, you know, normalized or satisfied by putting this in place. And I think people find that really frustrating or confusing. I can see the face in my head of people when they ask about it. And my go-to answer is usually to say things like, well, you know, any accommodations that you're putting in place should be something you can put in place for everybody, and you should be prepared to put it in place for everybody without them specifically having to tell you that they've got ADHD. Then you're good. And basically what you're asking people to do is like what you said, you've asking them to be empathetic or just non-judgmental, really. I think, you know, just whatever, that's what you like to do. You like to sit on your chair sideways and you're comfortable doing that. And even though I might know that ergonomically that's not good for your back, but if you're happy doing it, crack on. Sit on. It makes no odds to me. Why would I make you sit on your chair a certain way? The same kind of idea. It doesn't, you know, that didn't cost me a lot of energy or time in order to allow you to sit on the chair wherever you want. And that, to me, it's that simple.
It is. And that, I mean, that's on the corporate side of what I do, that's the same type of thinking that I really try to bring. It's a little easier to bring it from the neurodiversity perspective, I think.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you start trying to talk about accommodation or culture or when you start using those words, people put up walls.
Yeah. It's different. Nobody wants to be different, like you say. Yeah.
Right. And when you're like, okay, let's talk about neurodiversity, people are like, oh, brains. Let's talk about brains. How can we help brains? How can we help people function better? How can we help productivity? It triggers differently. It's like, okay, now we're talking about helping people. We're talking about recognizing. We're talking about holistic approaches. Okay, now let's talk about how this affects people with medical needs, how this affects people with general needs, because everyone has off days.
Yes.
Now we're getting into intersectionality. Now intersectionality impacts culture. So, okay, fine. You don't want to talk about things from the bottom up. Let's talk about it sideways. That's fine.
Yeah. I think as long as we're talking about it, I think what I find is that the more people talk about it and become more comfortable, even if they're going kind of, I don't really know how to ask this question, but I want to know X, Y, and Z in order to do better. You know, I think people, if we can get people to the stage at which, whether it's the people that have needs or the people that should be allowing for those needs, that they're comfortable speaking out loud. I want to say without judgment, but, you know, with good intention and want to do the right thing, then I think that helps. So, but that begins, unfortunately, with those of us that have the needs having to push the conversation, and many people who have the needs don't want to be the one to. I've found that with women in tech. If you're the only woman in the room, you become the speaker, whether you like it or not. You become the representative of that group because you're the only one there. So therefore, you are, even if you don't open your mouth. And it's the same with any other diverse group. If you're the only person that looks, sounds, or behaves differently, then therefore you're the representation that they see. And yeah, that's with neurodiversity, that becomes way more complex because, like I said, mine is different to the next person's, different to yours, and different to my kids, and different to your sisters. Yeah, trying to get a hand on that. I've wandered off for miles, but it's intriguing to me, and I think we could dig around in that for ages and ages and ages and still not find a conclusive answer. But yet, I've no doubt that you could accommodate anyone who came to you and said that they had certain ways of doing things or certain needs. And I feel like I could. I'm getting better at it. There's definitely things that'll catch me by surprise because I'm not an expert at it. But it's trying to get other people, ironically, to think the same way as us, which is what they've been trying to get us to do all along. But yeah.
It can feel like an uphill battle because it's breaking the norms of how people are used to thinking, where everyone fits into neat little boxes.
Yeah.
And it's getting comfortable with things being fluid and messy.
Yes. And not very many people are, I'm learning. Not very many.
No.
With that, let's go on, right? Because how we actually connected in the first place is that you were running the ADHD mastermind course, and I was sulking because it was on your human time. And obviously, I'm in Ireland, so it was on stupid o'clock for me. But I guess explain to me how the background that you have then in nursing and holistic coaching led to the creation of this course.
This is really kind of the culmination of everything that I have been building to, where the ADHD program itself was originally and continues to be an 8-week course that I created that focuses on the essential 8s that I've distilled kind of ADHD management down to. And it didn't start with the idea that I was going to be like, oh, it's going to be 8s. It kind of fell backwards into everything happening to be 8s. I was like, oh, that's a thing.
Coincidence,
yeah. It actually started with the 8 dimensions of wellness, which is very universal. It's the universal concept in holistic wellness, where everything that makes us fits into one of these categories, whether it's health, education, job. It all fits into one of these areas. But every time you look at one of these models, it's all broken out into a circle or separate areas. And that drove me up a wall because we're coming at it from a holistic perspective. And I understand it from a traditional coaching model where you focus on one thing at a time. But again, from that neurodiverse brain, it refused to accept the fact that you are addressing one area and that you're ignoring the fact that if you change something in one part of your life, that it is going to impact every part of your life, because we exist as a whole.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that I did was I revisualized the model to go from being separate parts to basically one giant 8-section Venn diagram. Well, more than 8 sections. I haven't counted how many sections that creates. It's a lot, but everything is overlapping because everything affects everything
in real life. Yeah,
exactly. And we're existing in real life. Our ADHD impacts our real life. So this is the visual representation of that, and really being able to accept and being willing to accept that even if you come into a session with me, we may not end where you thought where we started off. Things are going to wander as you come to a hurdle or a solution. It may be like, oh, wait, I wanted to focus on this finance issue. And, oh, that's leading to relationships. So we end up talking about the relationship issue. Cool. I'm not going to fight you on that, because that's just where things led.
Yeah.
And it started there. And then as I dug even deeper and really distilled down what the cores of ADHD are. It came down to the fact that there are 8 essential strengths that come with ADHD. There are, my camera's following me. There
I
are,
like it though. It's got mood.
yeah. There are eight essential tools that when I strip down everything else from the research, the training, everything else that I've done, it was 8 primary tools that encompass everything else, and then eight essential skills. Everything else builds out from these. So you have these essential 8s. I was able to build out an 8-week program that focuses on the core skills and tools that you need to have a foundation when you have that late in life diagnosis.
Yeah, cool.
So it started there, and then I still wanted to make it more accessible, because coaching is not always the most accessible tool for people. So not only do I offer intermittent free mastermind online masterminds, which are much more of a roundtable discussion.
Yeah.
Where, I do lead it, but you get to build that community, you get to have that greater engagement, and you do have that guidance from me as a coach as well. But now I'm offering it regularly as a membership for people at a affordable price point, so that they can access it, get over that price barrier.
Yeah.
Have access to ADHD coaching, have access to these skills, these tools, have access to a community to break that feeling of isolation, and really start the process of moving forward with ADHD, instead of just being stuck spinning and questioning, how do I do this? How do I deal with it? So that's really where this came from, how it built up, and just how it's all come together.
So would it be targeted then specifically at like diagnosed, or if somebody was diagnosed, like, does it matter when they're diagnosed? Would they all get benefit out of it if they're in that? Because I think anyone can potentially be in that stage of like, in life, and then also be ADHD as well. So would it benefit them regardless of when they're diagnosed, or if they're diagnosed at all even?
I'm going to work backwards on that one. So this is part of why I really love coming at it from the nursing perspective.
Yeah.
Because I ultimately don't care if there's actually a diagnosis. The diagnosis can be helpful for you as a point of understanding, as a building block. And if you want to take the step forward with medication, outside of that, what I care about is, do you have symptoms that are impacting your daily life? If the answer is yes, come on board.
Yeah.
We got answers, because this is really what's great, because I'm not bound by insurance companies saying, oh no, there's no diagnosis, you're not going to get treatment. I'm not bound by diagnostic codes, and because I'm not offering a diagnosis, it makes it great, because I'm here to help people and help them move forward with what is actually holding them back, and help them move forward rather than, focus on diagnostics.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. So late in life diagnosis, this can be a big help, because it gets you out of that kind of downward spiral that you get stuck in when you're like, everything makes so much sense. Now what?
Yeah. And that's so true. Like, because I think I was lucky in that when I found out I was in a good place, so I didn't feel that sense of mourning that a lot of people will feel. Like, anytime if I do find myself going, oh, I wonder, would I have done X, Y, or Z differently had I have known then? But then I'm also well aware that there's absolutely no way in this wide earthly world I would have been diagnosed then, because of how I'm asked, because I was female, because it was different to anybody else that was being diagnosed, and because of how very few people were being diagnosed anyway, and those who were climbing the curtains. Like, they were really obviously over the top stereotyped kind of ADHD symptoms. So there's no point in thinking about something that wouldn't have happened regardless, couldn't have happened. It's not that somebody missed it. There just wasn't the resources and the education or the knowledge or the people there to do it at the time. So I'm good. But I've met people who have found it very, very difficult. Maybe their situation would have been different. Like, you're way ahead, clearly. Even when you talk about the word progesterone, we laugh about that in the class. But the fact that there was when advocated for, there was the means that could be put in front of you, then there wasn't anything like that I don't think before even the 2000s maybe here, like, you know, we're a good few decades behind. But yeah, I think I've met a lot of people that have found it very difficult and very traumatic, and they go through all of those mourning stages and such with it. And I've always found it interesting. It's always interesting what it is that they focus on. And for everybody, you know, it could be anything. It could be relationships. It could be education. It could be your career path. It could be your family, whatever it is. And you're right, like there isn't, without going to very expensive services that aren't necessarily holistic, like you say, you know, they're covering one kind of specific area, or signing up to 40 million apps that claim to fix it, which always, I have a whole like feelings about that. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
But there isn't that. You need the holistic approach, because inevitably if they come to you and say, I'm terrible with my eating habits, XYZ, there's going to be a multitude of factors impacting that. It's not just a case of you going, okay, well, we're going to put this system in place that means you eat regularly and eat the right things. There's other things that impact that on both the ADHD side and life side of things then too. So I like that. I'm trying to think, have I heard yet of anybody else? I'm sure that there's someone somewhere, but I haven't heard of anybody that's doing it that way, thinking of it all. And do you think the fact that you have it, that your ADHD is helping you to see the bigger picture of all of that?
100%. And one of the strengths that I usually don't talk about early on, because it's one that people aren't willing to recognize early on, because you're still processing through everything else. It's not that strength isn't there. It's just one that people aren't ready to talk about yet.
Yeah.
I call it accordion thinking, where
How does that work?
So it's that ability to go down to that micro level and focus in on all of the details, but then you're able to quickly zoom out and have that 10,000 foot view.
Kudos.
Take it all back in, bring it back, but then you can come back into that micro and reapply it, and you're able to go.
I like that.
It's accordion thinking.
Yeah, and even when you're doing the gesture, and I'm like, that makes perfect sense. That's going to stick with me now, simply because I've got the gesture, and I had an uncle who played the accordion like enthusiastically and really, really well, so much so that I hated it. And it's great music if you like it, but you know when you hear something all the time. But now I've got the imagery that's going to stick with me forever, and I'm probably going to like use it with people in conversation. Consider it stolen, right?
Go for it.
But that makes perfect sense, and it's that the ability to move in and out of that. I like that. But you're embracing people's different ways of thinking, and yours then too. Like you're adapting to it, which is what somebody needs. So I find sometimes, like I've spoken to, say, career coaches. I know that's a different kind of coach, but I often find I'm like, keep up. Like, I want to do this, and this is how I want to do it. And no, you're not. I just feel like they're not keeping tabs on all of the things that I'm considering or doing, because I feel like I'd be 10 steps ahead of them, not in like a cocky way, but because I'm considering all of the other possible things that are impacting the situation right now. And they're going, here's what we need to focus on. Look straight ahead and we'll focus on this. But I've already considered all of the things that might impact that on the outside, which, yeah, it has its benefits. Yes. But it can cause its problems as well. And that then to me doesn't naturally align to things like mindfulness and martial arts, the things that you've mentioned earlier. Because mindfulness for me, I always think like meditation, and meditation used to give me the willies, is the best way that I could put it, because it was almost like I gave my brain permission to go a million miles a minute, because I was like, you cannot think about anything else except meditating. And then it goes into everything.
Yeah.
And I probably could do it now purely because I'm medicated. But how do you integrate the two of those things then into the strategies that you're using?
I am so glad that you brought that up, because mindfulness is actually a cornerstone of what I use. But mindfulness is not meditation, and meditation integrates mindfulness, but this is where I can lose some people, but it is such an important distinction.
All right.
Mindfulness is a practice. Mindfulness is something that we are able to integrate into our daily lives. And there are mindfulness practices, and I can talk about a couple of them just to make that make sense.
Yeah.
But mindfulness requires awareness, intention, and non-judgment.
Okay, it sounds more like
That's
is it like self-awareness kind of side of things? Would that be more mindfulness, or is that a part of it?
it. That becomes a part of it,
Okay.
but we can. It's just being aware. So I'm going to skip over mindful breathing because that starts to move into kind of the meditation piece of it.
Yeah.
So that can be a little more difficult. One of the mindfulness practices that I tend to start people with is mindful looking,
Okay.
which sounds silly at first. But
Curious.
if you take any object that you have in your
Mm-hmm.
room, so let's say I just picked
Ring
up
in my hand.
perfect. You have a ring, I have a highlighter.
Okay.
If you started with even just 2 minutes, you look at I would look at my highlighter, you would look at your ring, look at it like it's the first time you're seeing it, that the
Okay.
first time you have ever seen it in your life.
So
You
it's
turn it,
intentional.
it's intentional, and you make yourself aware of every detail. Take it in, let it wash over you, be intentional about looking at it. Take the time to do it. Really be aware of every detail of that ring. But instead of judging if the ring is new, old, shiny, dirty, scratched, any of those judgmental thoughts,
Yeah.
let those go and just take in the visual input. That's the non-judgmental piece.
So simple. I'm like going, how did I not get that? That's really simple. I like it. It makes
It
sense. Like,
it it is, but it shifts how
yeah.
your brain is functioning.
Do you know what it reminds me of? I used to have panic attacks when I was younger. All makes sense now that I'm older, and especially if I was inclined to have a couple of drinks, definitely. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember learning the technique when you have panic attacks of I think it's like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or sometimes people will call it, but you'll focus on a particular item and you'll like, how does it smell? How does it look? You'll go through all of these things.
Yes.
And it reminds me of that in some ways because I can still visualize. I remember having a panic attack in my now husband's house and I can still hear the tap that I was describing and I can still see all of the little scratches on it, all of that kind of stuff. But it's just when you were talking about it, I don't think I ever look at anything in that much detail since that. And I haven't had panic attacks for 25 years. But I haven't thought to look at something in a positive,
Yeah.
intentional way. That was not that it wasn't positive. The environment wasn't positive, but doing that definitely had a positive result.
Right.
And it totally changed both my physical and mental space in that moment. That's what I mean about as you're saying that, I'm going, oh my God, that's so simple. How have I been 25 years where I actually know how to do this and I haven't done it? How did I not realize? Because you can absolutely completely change where your mind is at in a moment by doing something like that. That's fantastic. God, that was totally worth having you on just for that. I'm not going to lie.
I love
For
that.
me, anyway.
But the truth is, but you can do the same thing with listening.
Yeah.
Where you sit instead of taking it in by looking, any space, just being aware of every sound that you're taking in. It's again that same exercise that you're talking about for coming out of the panic attack, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How does it look? How does it sound? How does it smell? Instead of using it to rapidly cycle through to shift your mindset and bring you out of it, it's doing each one of those pieces individually for an extended period of time, and that shifts how your brain functions. There are 5 different exercises that I ultimately build people to, and that's the foundation that brings you to being able to meditate, because it changes.
Makes sense,
yeah, because meditate. So those are the practices. Because once you start working on that, you start doing that subconsciously when you're just going through your daily life. Meditation is an exercise. Meditation is like going to the gym.
Yeah. To me, meditation hadn't got
takes work.
Purpose. Like, I know someone might be talking you through meditation. If I was doing it myself or listening to music, I felt like it was missing purpose. And even if it is looking at my ring here and looking at all the details on it, it's intentional. It's a purpose. Like one of my sons is saying to me that he was seeing a therapist and he was like, I was talking to him about how I struggle to relax. And he said that the therapist said to him that he has to make relaxing an activity. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Explain it to me. And he's like, I have to intentionally relax. I have to put it on my schedule and make it something that I'm consciously doing in order to relax. And when he had explained it to me, I was like, oh, because I don't think I've ever relaxed in my entire life until I found out I had ADHD. And then I was able to, for me, that was 50% of the battle, was just knowing, getting the validation of having it. But prior to that, definitely not for a moment ever. Like, so I couldn't understand this idea. When he explained it to me, I was like, so I can do it. It can be like a thing I can tick off my list, but still relax because I'm doing it intentionally. It's like, oh, because I can't even say if I've had a day in a spa and I'd be with my sister at the end of it, I'd be like, so do we go now? And she wants to sit and relax. You know, you're supposed to do this like relaxation stuff afterwards. I'm like, do we leave? What are we doing next? You know, I could never do it. But the way he puts it, it's the intention to me is the difference. My dog has wandered in. Yeah, the intention for me is where the biggest differentiator is in what you've been saying. Like, I was attempting to do these things and couldn't understand the purpose or the intention behind it. Now that you've said it all, it seems so simple. And I'm like, how did it take? Well, it didn't take me 25 years. It took me 10 seconds to get it once you said it the right way. But the 25 years prior to that, I've been just really busy.
It can be hard, and relaxing can be difficult. I regularly take clients through a body scan exercise, which the name sounds woo-woo. That's not what it is, though. It's bringing that calm, and it's using that awareness starting at the top of your head, working your way down and finding those tension points.
Yeah.
And then intentionally relaxing, and then working your way down and creating that relaxation through your whole body to let yourself level out, to let yourself let go and let that tension fleet. My brain's stuck on fleet.
Release it from the body. Like,
release. Yeah. Let that tension release from your body. And then after you let go of the day, all of that stress, then that's when we're able to really get into the actual work.
It's so cool. I'm still completely baffled at how simple that was now that you said it. But for me, it often takes a case of like, somebody, I can have different people explain something to me 101 different ways, but eventually I'll get somebody who'll say it and I'll be like, oh, that's it now, I've got it sorted. I'm going to carry that one with me forever. Because it now makes sense to me. And what I find one of the biggest things with my ADHD anyway is that if something doesn't make sense to me, if I don't understand why we're doing something or how it works, forget about it. Like, I can never become committed to it. And I can never give it my best because why? Math was one for me, which is so stupid when I think about it because I'm good at coding and that kind of stuff. But I was like, but why? Why am I doing this? Like, what am I achieving at the end of it? If I was making something like in a technology class or even cooking something in school, which we often did a lot of, or writing something, there was something to be read at the end of it. But math, you got a right answer. Why? Like, what have I changed in the world with that right answer? Now, obviously, I'm on the other end of it and I can see absolutely all the benefits of math. And I'm in a house full of people who love math and physics and applied math and all that. But I just couldn't, at the time, nobody could tell me in a way that was reasonable why I needed to be doing this beyond, paying for things and understanding basic math, but why I was doing X plus Y. Why? I need to know. And when I look at it now,
I was in the same boat. And I swore up, down, and sideways that when I was struggling with proofs in algebra, that I was never going to need them, that if you had the answer and you had the solution, you didn't need anything else. And honestly, my first semester in nursing school, I was working through an issue during my first clinical rotation. And it was like, well, this happened. And then we have the reason and we have the result. I was like, and I was working it backwards. And I was like,
there it is. Yeah.
and while my friends like, what? I was like, I just did a proof to solve this one.
And I just wish if somebody could give an example like that to kids in school, but I had teachers who couldn't explain themselves beyond what was on the board, what the purpose of it was. Like my kids, to be fair, they've got a chap who teaches them, I feel like he's a chap. But he teaches them all three of those subjects. He's just super genius. He also, I think, is autistic as well. So he is like super direct, which they love as ADHDers. So like, I don't want to hear your sugar-coated versions. If I suck at this, tell me so, but then tell me how to do it right. But they've got the perfect combination of teacher that gives them purpose for everything that they're doing. So they're fascinated by it. They can't get enough of it. And I can understand what they're explaining to me, and I can understand the purpose of it. So some of it was down to the teacher, but again, my generation, You weren't supposed to question them for starters. You definitely weren't supposed to argue with them about things. And then if you didn't understand it, it was your fault, not theirs. And it's just, teaching is not like that now. They definitely try a whole lot harder to approach it in many different ways so that all of the kids can understand it, which I'm grateful for because I get a second run at it now. But that's probably part of it. And then now I know, like, say, part of it is that purely I need to understand why I'm doing things. I was never good with somebody saying, just because I told you so, so just do it. But why? No, I won't. You know, so now that all makes sense to me. But yeah, this has been a revelation for me so far. I'm half afraid to talk to you much longer in case I learn any more things about myself and I won't sleep tonight. Would you say, it's funny because I'm listening to your side and your experience and the things that you're doing, and I've had conversations with people. Actually, the only one I'm thinking, I had one of these episodes I did with my sister and my niece and her diagnosis, and it was pretty traumatic, I guess, the whole experience. Again, with girls being diagnosed, it takes a little bit longer, and of course she was diagnosed with 500,000 things that were not ADHD before she was diagnosed with that. But one of the things that you've spoken about that I know was a thread throughout her conversation was the having to lean into what her child needed, her ADHD person needed, even if it flew in the face of what other people thought that she needed, professionals as in teachers and stuff, having to create a certain space and having to allow, not allow for certain things, but to adapt to what those needs were to keep her alive at some points till, like, eventually she got the diagnosis totally different in a good way. Now they're in a great place. But if we were talking to parents of ADHD children, and based on your upbringing, because I've already learned loads, and your professional experience, and the things that you're coaching, all of the things that you know, is there any particular advice that you'd give to people who are parents of children now that either they suspect are neurodivergent or are?
It is a difficult road, no matter what, with or without a diagnosis. And I mean, I know that even when I talk about my path, I trim it down, and that leaves out the parts where I also struggled with severe depression. It leaves out the parts where I had, you know, difficult relationships around food and body dysmorphia, with the combination of, you know, being a competitive athlete plus having ADHD. And yeah, like these are real things that come with having this, for whether male and female. It doesn't discriminate there.
No, for sure.
And so it's a lot to take in, because it's more than just the behavioral needs. It's more than just the learning needs. It really is being able to be supportive and letting your child know that you are a support system that they can be open and honest with, and letting, if nowhere else is, letting your home be a safe place for them to not have to mask, where they can truly be themselves, where they can fully express themselves with complete safety and honesty. Because if they have nowhere else to turn, it's something that increases their risk factors threefold.
Easy.
And by pretending, if you pretend ADHD doesn't exist, it is so detrimental to not only to mental health but to physical health. I mean, ADHD, by the numbers, untreated and unmanaged ADHD has a 3 times higher mortality rate before the age of 40 than smoking.
Wait, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So untreated and unmanaged ADHD is more detrimental to your health than smoking. Smoking, for someone who is smoking, you know, a pack and a half to 2 packs a day, takes roughly 8 years off your life. Untreated and unmanaged ADHD takes around 13 years off your life, by the numbers.
Wow.
That's a lot. It is a lot. that's because of the socioeconomic impact, the impacts on being able to maintain a job, relationships, distraction levels, and increased risk-taking behaviors with drugs, alcohol, sex, everything else. It is such a pervasive impact. So for parents who think that their kids may have ADHD, be that support system. Educate yourself on what supports are available, what resources are available. Stay as calm as you can. Don't react in anger, but be encouraging. Don't try and force your child to fit into a standard box where if everyone is going right and your kid is saying that they feel like they have to go left, figure out how to support them to go left. Don't force them to go right, because that will make them miserable and they will struggle 10 times more.
Absolutely. I think one thing we've noticed, and it was interesting, my husband raised it with me. He says, every time I pick up the little man, the youngest, is most likely ADHD as well. We haven't sought a diagnosis yet, but we're working on it. It takes forever. But he says, every time I pick him up from school, he's contrary. He's so frigging contrary. And he had said this a few times, why do I always get him contrary? Why is he always better when he sees you? And I had said, well, I think what it is, and because I've learned this from my niece, who's older than him by about 5 years, I said, is that he's doing his due, as I call it. Like, he's playing the part and putting on the show and doing all the things he has to do to get through his day. This child is 10, to get through his day in school. So that when he comes out of school and he gets into the car with me or with you, he's now in the safe space and he no longer has to be putting on the show and being all of the things that he's supposed to be in school. And he's burnt out and he's tired and he's done. And I say relaxed, but people assume relaxed being a good thing, but he just lets it all go. And then we've got contrary, tired, fed up 10-year-old who's just had enough of trying to maintain that for so many hours. And usually if we leave him to do whatever he winds down with for an hour or so and comes back, then we're back. We're good. We are all systems go again, which aligns to the theory. Like, I think a lot of parents, my husband included in this particular case, and definitely me prior with the other two, was we just thought like, Jesus, they're so grumpy. Why are they so grumpy with me all the time? And there's a tendency to be defensive, that you're only arguing with them all the time because they're grumpy. But what I've learned is that, especially when other people say, God, they're never grumpy in school, or they're never grumpy in work, or they're never grumpy with their friends. And then the pennies started to drop and I'm going, oh, right. So they're only comfortable being that way, allowing themselves to show somebody how burnt out and done and overstimulated they are when they're here, which is actually a good thing. So I know for parents who haven't put those pieces together yet, I know for me, I want to say that one out loud and go, it's actually a good thing. Doesn't mean they hate you. It actually means very much the opposite in many cases. That's what I've learned anyway. And as soon as that occurred to me, I know I got off my highly strung, highly contrary high horse where I was like, snap out of it. I was one of those kind of people, but I got off it there. So like I say, the patience is a huge, huge thing. But it is really, really hard, especially if you don't have the diagnosis or support or whatever it is that you need to. But I have seen the light at the end of the tunnel with mine and with my niece and people, and you're probably the best inspiration for it as well. It does happen with those practices and that patience in place. So yeah, cool. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. Like I say, I've learned so much. I am nearly afraid to keep talking, but I'm so curious now about the course. Maybe we'll stay up ridiculously late. Catch one of them. But no, it has. It's been really enlightening. It's always nice to hear how other people approach things, but to get so deeply into it, yeah, I appreciate the time and the patience it takes to do that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I love doing this. I love talking about it, and this has been a work of absolute passion. And honestly, like to just kind of like put a bow on it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you've experienced this too. Like, when ADHD gets talked about, it gets talked about as like this big, monstrous, complex thing that is so complicated to deal with, is so amorphous, where everyone needs something different and special. And how can we even talk about it in this realistic way? No, that's not the reality. That is really where this course came from, because number one, there isn't actually that much research out there, which is like not great, but it makes it a lot easier to consolidate all the research.
Yeah.
But also, when you read enough of it and you read enough of the books and you listen to you listen to the experts, and you take the courses, you see the patterns, and that this course is the consolidation of all of that. It's not as complicated as people make it. I think it's really just come down to that there aren't enough people talking to each other in the right way and not seeing the patterns that exist.
I think this conversation has been the absolute demonstration of that for me, that's for sure. It's so badly needed. Thank you so much, Seth. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.